Hey guys, it's Tarkan back with another video. How about that? I have a channel and I make videos. How's everyone doing out there? I'm doing amazing. It's a gorgeous fall day here today. It's all crisp and sunny and the leaves are changing colors. So I've been out bouncing around out there, mostly doing errands, but it's nice to be outside and do that every now and then. But I decided that I would sit here for a minute and give you guys another video, another little something to think about. And this is kind of, this one ties in a little bit to the last one where I discussed the idea of changing the past, right? Because I'd responded to some questions about people wanting to do revision. Actually, it was Zena's question, one question about it. Revising a past event. In other words, a past event that was unpleasant, unwanted, uncomfortable, and going back and visualizing having the event occur differently, right? And if you remember in that video, or if you haven't watched it yet, a quick recap is basically I say I wouldn't put that much focus and energy into trying to change past events that were unpleasant or unwanted, because it takes a lot of energy, right? A lot of focus to do so, and especially if you're kind of beginning and starting out with the whole manifesting trip. You don't really want to sort of just, run a marathon if you're completely out of shape and you haven't really been running or exercising kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's just going to end up exhausting you and you're not going to really get to that finish line or really succeed in that sense. So, there's sort of a lot to be said about taking things one step at a time, all right? And I know a lot of you guys out there, you have that sense of urgency. I want this now, which of course is, what does that do? It keeps it from coming now, okay? Because you're putting your focus into something as it is, or into the idea of it's not here yet, right? Which is precisely the same kind of mentality that's attached to the idea of trying to change a past event that was unpleasant. So, but on that note, and you can go back to the last video before this one and you can watch that one if you haven't already, so I won't get too deeply into that. But here's another way of looking at things that I wanted to suggest to you that's kind of tied into that. So the idea here is not so much to try to go back and revise a past event that was unwanted or a past manifestation that was unwanted, but what you want to do in this sense is to begin to look at your desire, what it is you want to manifest the most, from the perspective of a future self, looking at it from a past event, or as a past event, right? So this is an interesting trick, and what we're talking about here is, this is kind of a technique. It's going a little bit in a different direction, okay? Because I tend to stress self-love and all that's all stuff that you want to keep practicing, self-love and working on your confidence, and appreciating and respecting yourself. But here's another kind of thing. The thing about this is that some of these techniques are going to be designed to kind of trick your mind, right? Trick yourself and your mind and your thinking into adopting a new way of looking at things. In other words, adopting a whole new identity. That's why the self-love and doing the inner work and working on yourself is also so important. Because what you're doing here, try to look at it from this sense, and I say this a lot too, what you want already exists. But what I mean by that is it already exists on a parallel timeline. And because it already exists on a parallel timeline, there's also a parallel timeline version of you already living that thing, already enjoying that thing, okay? Now, what you want to do is not so much try to bring that thing into your reality, but you're trying to bring yourself into the mindset of the version of you that is already enjoying that reality, okay? Because that version of you is out there, like I said. So you're trying to sort of plug yourself into who is that version of me, right? You're really trying to become that version of yourself, so that you're looking at things from the perspective of that version of self that is enjoying the things that you want. How does that version of you, speak? What kind of words does that version of you use? What kind of language does that version of you use? How does that version of you think? How does that version of you feel? What does that version of you do on a daily basis? How does that version of you react to certain circumstances? How does that version of you carry themselves? How do they walk around? What's their body language, right? How do they feel? How do they think? How do they act? What do they do? What do they say? Okay, this is the perspective you want to get into, and really what it comes down to is not so much that you're even switching timelines or trying to bring an event or a circumstance or a manifestation into your present timeline. It's about switching yourself into that timeline, right? It's so you're really changing your identity is what you're doing. And this is also why the inner love is so important, okay? And I want to stress this again. I think sometimes people don't understand why it works so well, or why it's so important, or why I keep stressing that as being basically the most important thing that you can do in terms of getting your manifestation, especially when it comes to a relationship that you want to manifest, a specific person or an ex, is because the version of you that has that person, has that relationship, has a certain outlook on life and has a certain attitude about themselves. You see what I'm saying? Because you can see that the version of you that's sort of not very self-loving, not very self-appreciative, not very self-respecting, okay, has a lot of issues with confidence and self-image, is not going to be the version that's enjoying a healthy, happy, loving, mutually loving, respectful relationship with somebody. You see what I'm saying? So you want to become that version of yourself that's already out there, that already has this idea about themselves, that they're awesome, that they're deserving, that they're worthy, that they're lovable, that they love themselves, that nobody can really hurt them necessarily because they just don't even react to people being negative towards them. They don't even give that any focus or any time because they're too busy focusing on themselves, focusing on how awesome their life is, focusing on making themselves and their lives the best version that they can possibly make those things, right? So that's the mindset that you want to slip into. That's the identity that you want to adopt. And so that's why practicing self-love and confidence and self-awareness and self-worth is so important, because that is the first sort of step that you can take to put on the shoes and the pants and the suit of that version of yourself that is living what it is that you want. Okay? And this is why it's so important not to try to change the other person in the equation, the circumstances, because nothing will change for the long term if you don't change on the inside and your story about yourself and the way you view yourself for the long term. Okay? So that is why that is so important. So you want to really kind of get into the mind. It's not so much of looking at it from that perspective, at the situation from that perspective. It's more like looking as it. You see what I'm saying? You want to look at things, and not just your desire and your circumstance with your specific person as the version of you that's already enjoying that, but you want to look at everything as that version. Okay? Everything about yourself, everything about your life, your work, your relationships with your family, your friends, how you deal with money, all right? All that kind of stuff is, that version of you is looking at all those things in a specific way. And so that version of you is already living a life that flows easier, that flows better, where things work out for them, where they have the relationship that they want, where they have the job that they want, where they have all the relationships with their family and friends that they want, and their coworkers and bosses that they want, maybe where they have the business that they want to have, that you want to have, where they have the money situation that you prefer. Okay, so they're looking at all the things differently, and that's why they're already enjoying those things. All right, so you want to plug yourself into the mindset of that person, of that version of yourself. All right, and so on that note, a really effective technique is to really get silent. Okay, that's like the first thing, and I'm gonna start stressing meditating more, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. You just want to sort of practice getting to moments, even if it's just a few minutes a day, of just reaching silence. All right, it's internal silence where you're not thinking about what you want, what you need, what you got to do that day, what's going on around you so much. You want to get to a 0 point a little bit, okay? And start practicing getting into that 0 point, where basically what you're doing is you're teaching yourself to let go of the circumstance as it is, which is the circumstance that you want to change, right? When you want to change the circumstance, you have to let go of the circumstance. That's really all that you need to do. It's not about going back in there and visualizing about it having turned out differently, because that's already happened, okay? There's already a reality where that circumstance either never occurred, or it already turned out differently, and all you have to do is look at it from the perspective of the person that's already occurred, of the version of yourself where that has already resolved itself, or it's just simply no longer an issue. It's sunny here in Portland, so everyone's on their motorcycles. Things are going to change very soon and get very dark and dreary and drizzly. So people are taking advantage of the last bits of sunshine that we're going to have here. But anyway, so in other words, you know, what you can do is become very silent and start to think in that silence. Start reaching for the feeling and the perspective of that version of yourself that is already living what it is that you want. All right, in that way you're directly communicating with them, but what you're really doing is you're actually crossing into that reality in the moment, even when you're just imagining it. Okay, just the fact that you even can imagine it means that it already exists and you're plugging into it. That's sort of the first kind of tentative steps you're going to take towards adopting that new cloak, that new perspective, that new outlook of that person, of slipping into their skin, right? And looking at things from their perspective, looking at things as them, as that version of you, okay? So that's like an important step, first step to do that. And then as you're reaching for those things, as you're kind of going into that silence and you're sort of letting it occur to you a little bit, all right? You're not even really reaching for anything necessarily, but you're just kind of getting silent enough and just allowing the thoughts to kind of come into your mind and then exploring how it is they feel to you, right? And as you have sort of a pleasant feeling, you're imagining yourself already with that person, with that money, with that job or that business that you want, or whatever, or driving the car that you want, or whatever it is that you want. Then you're already wearing their shoes and their pants and their suit, basically. You see what I'm saying? And so you want to practice that from that perspective of going, I'm slipping into this new skin, the skin of the version of myself that has everything that I want, but that also has this particular perspective on things, which is why they have what it is I want. You know, in my timeline, let's say. All right. So the other thing, and I think I mentioned this already, instead of doing the revision from that perspective then of say, trying to change an unwanted past event, what you want to do, and I think a great and effective technique to begin to sort of trick your mind into accepting this new reality version of yourself, is to begin to journal as them. All right, and this is this is an older technique, and I don't even know honestly who came up with it to begin with, but and I remember reading about it from different sources. So it's just something. It's very simple. You know, you might be sort of keeping a journal or scripting about what it is you want as a future event. Okay, because this is a lot of times what people do when they're visualizing, when they're scripting, they're looking at everything as a future event. But this is kind of switching it around a little bit. It's the old switcheroo. Okay. Like using that term. The old switcheroo is saying that you're not visualizing or scripting a future event. You're actually visualizing and scripting about a past event that you prefer, right? So you're looking at your desire that you want to manifest as having already occurred, and you're doing that through the lens of the future self or the alternate self, writing about it as a past event. So in other words, you want to get together with that person, or let's say you even just want them to text you and blow up your phone all the time and show that they're interested, because that's what a lot of you guys want. And that's really why you want it, is because you want them to make it easy for you to get together with them, right? That's really what it comes down to. I don't want to chase them. I want them to chase me, so that I'm sure that they're interested in me, and then I can feel more confident about going out with them. That's really what that's about, okay? So you can even script from that perspective of somebody that's already happened. You would sit down, and when I say keeping a future journal, I mean keeping it on a regular basis. Okay, you want it just like you might journal about your life now, sort of as is, right? As you're perceiving it, as it seems to be unfolding around you. You want to simply do the same thing and just keep a journal about how you want things to be, and from the perspective of the self, the version of you, where that's already occurred for them. Okay, and this kind of really plugs into living in the end. It was the big Goddard thing, right? Go to the mindset of the wish having already been fulfilled. But this is a great way that you can kind of put it into a practice, into a physical practice that allows your mind to kind of go through the motions of the person that might be the version of you that is enjoying what it is you want in that alternate timeline, you see? So you start writing, you start scripting like, oh my God, last Thursday he texted me, okay? And he was flirting with me very heavily, then he asked me out, and then we went out and this and that happened, okay? So really, I mean, it's that simple. I don't really have to get into it any more technically than that, but really what you're doing in that moment. And why this is, I think, a very effective technique to use is because as you're focusing on it from the perspective of a future self looking at a past event, you're no longer focusing your mind so much on how it is now, right? How you're perceiving it now. Because I get asked that a lot too. Tarkan, how do I stop thinking about how things are now? Well, you start thinking about, you stop doing that by beginning to think of how you want them to be. And one very effective way to do that is to trick your mind into believing and practicing that daily that what you want has already occurred, because it already has, you see. So this is a way, a lot of this is going to come down to, and a lot of manifesting technique is going to come down to you really kind of playing tricks on your brain, on your meat computer, on your monkey mind, all right? Because it wants to hold on so dearly to how things are, right? It doesn't want to let you kind of bust out of that what it has created as a comfort zone for itself, okay? Or it thinks that it's protecting you somehow from some devastating kind of change or disappointment. You want to move past that. And this is a great way to sort of begin to practice a new narrative and start tricking your mind into believing that what you want has already occurred as you daily going to practice a future journal, all right? So this is a very, there's really not much more in me to say about that, except that this also kind of ties in with another technique, which is where when you're visualizing alone, if you prefer to just visualize, you could visualize from the perspective of yourself, a future self, an alternate version self, speaking to somebody like a friend about the event that occurred that you want to occur so badly, okay? So that's another way. So in other words, you could be telling a friend or a family member about it from the perspective of future self, where the event has already occurred, or you could be telling your journal about it, okay? But either way, the gist of this really is to begin to start looking at it from the perspective. Look at your life and yourself from the perspective of the version of yourself that is already who you want to be, that already has what it is that you want, okay? Because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to you plugging into this alternate version of yourself, not them changing, not the circumstance changing, becoming what it is that you want, becoming the version of you that is living the life that you prefer, okay? So I hope that makes sense. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of questions about it, and I'll be able to clarify. And I know I have a lot of comments from the last video. I'm going to address those in a future video coming up very soon. But I've been thinking about this future journal thing, and I want you guys to try it out. I don't speak about techniques that often, so this is kind of a special one. And I really want to hear a lot of feedback from you guys if you're going to try this, or if you already have tried it and you've had any kind of success with it, even if you had some pitfalls with it, go ahead and mention that in the comments, okay? And ask your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, guys. It's a pretty short one. I'm going to go back and play in the dead leaves out there. I'm going to jump around like a little squirrel. All right, thanks for watching, guys. If you're new to this video, you like the cut of my jib, please subscribe. You know where the button is. All my subscribers and longtime viewers, thank you so much for watching. If you want some coaching with me, that's down below. If you want to leave me a tip, I always appreciate a tip. There's a couple of tip jars down below, one for Cash App, one for PayPal. Also, there's a link to the Facebook group. Please go ahead and join that. Great people over there. And otherwise, thank you for watching. And until next time, happy manifesting. Bye-bye.